From Accord, this is From Vendorship to Partnership, a show where we dive into the realities of scaling startups. This season, Accord's CEO, Ross Rich, chats with the next generation of startup founders about the ups and downs of signing their first customers while building a repeatable, collaborative sales process.
Hey, this is Ross here for your next episode of The Founder's Journey. I'm joined by Alexa from Pocus today and really excited for this one. You mind giving a quick intro?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So quick introduction. My name's Alexa. I am the CEO and founder of Pocus. Pocus is a product-led sales platform. So what that means is we help sales teams at product-led growth companies understand their best self-serve users to convert them to paying high-value customers. So quick background on myself. I'm originally from Philadelphia. Fast forward a bit, I was working at a company called Data Miner in New York, and I was leading sales strategy and operations. So my main goal was, how do I equip sales teams with the data they need to do their job well? So that led to building a lot of internal solutions similar to Pocus. I left Data Miner to go to business school at Stanford, where I really dove into the problems that Pocus is solving, and that led me to here.
Awesome. Well, you're already starting to touch on our usual first question, which is your founding story, but curious to hear, how you went from, thinking about these problems before business school to actually starting a company, to leaving the corporate world, business school, and going off on your own pretty recently. So curious to hear how you thought about making that leap.
Yeah. So like I said, I was leading sales strategy and operations at my last company and was just surprised by the lack of tech stack available for sales and marketing and go-to-market teams to really help them understand which users and accounts and teams to prioritize and really dive deeper to understand why they should be going after those leads. And so I ended up building a lot of DIY solutions and hacking things together and spending a lot of time on it. So when I left Data Miner to go to Stanford, I spent a lot of time just going really deep into these sales strategy and operation problems areas. So I think there was a 2-month period where I just talked to over 300 salespeople, primarily at PLG companies, and just did customer discovery. And a question I asked over and over again was, what is your biggest hair on fire problem? Mm-hmm. And every single salesperson I talked to said, I'm relying on my engineering and data team way too much to get the simple product usage data of how users are engaging with the product to inform who I should be going after. And so that was kind of the jumping off point to spending my life on this problem statement.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. It's one of those things where I feel like you hear and you're like, obviously there's been, even though like the whole product-led growth kind of like meme and acronym has been like a big thing this year, it's obviously been the main go-to-market motion for some of the most successful companies of the last 5 to 10 plus years, even in the B2B world, not just B2C. And the fact that there isn't a way for the sales team, marketing team to prioritize different accounts based on actions in the product is kind of wild. So it's been cool to see. I think that there's been a massive proliferation of people working on this problem. So super cool to see what comes out of that. So next big question, what was the biggest hurdle of, once you got started, you did all these, conversations, you're getting more and more excited, hearing this validation of the thing that you experienced from other people. What's been the most challenging thing since deciding to do this full time and really diving in?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest hurdle in a positive light is that there's a lot we could be building right now. Like, there is so much that needs to be built in this area of product-led sales. Where it becomes a hurdle is, what do you prioritize? And there's kind of this gut reaction that you want to build what you think is cool, but you can't. You can't just build what you think is fun and what you think is going to be really valuable. You need to build what your customers need now, and you need to focus on a MVP versus building the best solution with all of the ML and AI and automations and integrations. So our biggest hurdle has really been, where do we prioritize what to build? And again, SMBs want something different than mid-market, which want something different than enterprise, and DevOps tools want something different than productivity tools. So it's an exciting thing that everyone wants more, but
Yeah.
it's also a prioritization problem.
Totally. I think you're hitting on something that kind of reminding me of those days once you have this idea, start working on it, your co-founders and the first couple of people, and like everyone's saying all these things, and you're like so stoked. You're like, wow, this is like such a huge problem, and everyone's passionate about this and willing to spend their time. But then there's kind of this point, right, where it's like building really great technology, UI that feels in UX that feels intuitive, and like something that's scalable, and all these pieces. Like, what reality is, how long does it take to build those first, and then it's like, shoot, I kind of have to go from creating this dream and idea and potentially getting that funding or early employees, and going from like blue sky to, okay, this thing is kind of less exciting in a way than what we're going to get to and what I was thinking about most of the time before, but is really hard to be pragmatic about, like, what is the right market?
Mm-hmm.
And that could be the reason you succeed or fail from a startup, right? Is like, is it, like you said, the SMB mid-market enterprise the right place to approach this category? Is it dev tools or whatever? So it's a really interesting I don't think a lot of people talk about.
And I think another thing that you have to wrap your brain around is you can't just build something because you and your team and the founders think it's cool. You have to build something with a lot of discovery work up front. Like, you need your customers or beta customers or design partners or whatever it is to validate that they want this thing. It can't just be your gut. And that's something that was a hurdle early on. We think this is really cool. No, let's step back and actually validate this with a bunch of people.
Totally. Yeah. The push and pull of intuition. You're starting the company, you have this idea with the fact that like you want people to really use this thing that you're going to invest a ton of time and energy in. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So speaking of beta partners and co-designing and all this kind of stuff, how did you approach getting those first people to, getting in touch with them, the validation process, kind of building those partnerships where, you both know that they might be able to spend this time, working with their customers or doing other things that are more, near term, but they're investing the time with you because they're both excited about, the value you're going to provide them, but also kind of the problem space as well. How do you build those relationships and get that time from these great companies?
Yeah. So I can talk about this in two different scenarios. One was even before formally launching the company, how do you get folks time to do that customer discovery?
Yeah.
And then two, also real beta customers building the product with them. And I'm talking about the first one because you told me I should talk about the real life of a founder. And I think this actually shows the real life of the early days, where before, when I said I did those 300 customer interviews, it wasn't like I had a huge network of folks in sales that I could just call up 300 people and say, hey, can you tell me everything you want to build and dedicate an hour to me every week? I was literally spending hours on LinkedIn, sliding into every single salesperson's DM until I got on a conversation with every single sales leader at every hot PLG company. I was just relentless and frankly kind of annoying. And I really said, okay, let me just get on the phone with them. And then I want to understand their problems and make it clear I'm not trying to pitch something to them. I want to know how I can help them. Mm-hmm. And once I got on the phone with these folks and just really understanding their deepest, hardest problems to solve and starting to strategize, how could we solve this? And then they were able to give me an hour a week to say, let's build it together. And I could show them mock-ups and wireframes, and they told me what they like and don't like. And then now working with early beta customers, there's a little bit of, okay, you have the VC fundraising. We started to build a community. We started to build content. We started to build that credibility. So it's a bit of how do you educate the market and try to add value so that we could, have that inbound and have customers that are excited to work with us.
Yeah, no, it's great. Honestly, it's funny. It reminds me of like, it's almost easier to get those conversations when it's coming out of like, I literally have nothing to give you or to sell you.
Yeah.
I want to learn and talk about this stuff. And then kind of going back to what you were saying about the MVP, right? Is like, you're almost starting to limit what you need to do. You need to go from like any hot PLG company, doesn't matter the size, stage, product they're selling, etc. Learning. And then you kind of, have to make this tough decision of like, hey, this might not be relevant to these people. And I kind of need to maybe start selling this thing, or like, hey, like, if you're excited about this too, and we're building this together, like, are we going to get users to actually test this thing out? And like, you're going to have to introduce me to like sales ops and other people because it's going to become real. And I think that's like one of the more challenging stages. I think sometimes it can feel like even starting those conversations are hard, but kind of shifting from that to like, are we serious about this kind of thing?
Totally. And I think if you have a product that is solving a real need, then you can validate that by taking the next step. Will you introduce me to your boss? Will you introduce me to sales ops? Will you sign this agreement? Will we go through the procurement process? And that is, to me, even more validating than money at this point. It's time and commitment.
Totally. Yeah. And they're putting themselves out there, right? Like,
exactly.
If it doesn't work out, or they don't think they're going to introduce you to other people and put their kind of like social capital on the line for this, which is, definitely harder to spend than budget. Cool. So, now that you're doing that, you're, working super closely with these early partners, validated they're going to spend the time, all that kind of stuff. How do you think about, the earliest days of scaling go-to-market in terms of balancing marketing, sales, CS, you at the front lines, obviously at the beginning? I saw that you had a head of marketing already. Curious to hear kind of your approach to, those early hires and the founding team you're building around the go-to-market side of things.
Yeah, I can touch on why I hired a head of marketing so early, and then I can talk about how I think about scaling go-to-market. I think right now building this category of product-led sales is a new thing. It's a new concept. It's not just a new technology. It's a new shift in a cultural mindset in organizations. And there's a lot of education needed around, how do I create a product-led sales team? What does it look like? What are the technologies I need? What is a product qualified lead? And so there's a lot of, unanswered questions of what this should look like. So I never hired a team saying, I need a head of marketing because that sounds pretty cool. It was more the work I was doing, building this community, creating the content. I said, okay, what do I now need to hand off to the experts to help me build this thing? And that's really why early on I hired a head of marketing. But to be honest, she's more than just a head of marketing. I think she's really a sidekick and everything go to market. But that is where her specialty was. And I think good advice I got was that early on, I had probably one business hire that I could make, given that I want to prioritize engineering. And advice I got was, okay, what do you need to be A++ and what can be B+? And so I said, you know what, like maybe customer success at this point can be B+, but my marketing needs to be A++. And so I need to focus my areas on that. And I'll pause there for a second.
No, it's an interesting framework, I think, just to like apply that to other companies, potentially people that are listening is like, where are you spending your time? Where are you highest leverage? And how can you accelerate that? Because you're right, into everything the best. Where are you seeing things pay off early on and where are you spending your time? And not just like, I don't meant it this way of like hand it off, but like, hey, we're seeing this work. How do we continue to do that more? So it's not just me, and you can bring in someone who can take, who can take what you've done and started and continue that and up level that, which I think, is kind of what happened with us is like, hey, I unlocked a lot of the early conversations and we started to want to dive deeper into product feedback and all these kind of other things. So we brought on a CS lead first because that was, the thing that I was trying to spend more time on and would be highest leverage for Accord. So it's interesting.
And I won't say it's like, okay, hire someone and hand it off. It's more, I was experimenting early on. What works? What is sticking? What does this industry need? And I realized what they need is education and community and content. And I got to a point where I still spent a lot of time on it, but I couldn't do it alone. And I needed someone who's done this before to help me do it right.
Totally. So short question after that ties in well, how do you think about early hires just in general, right? Like, I think a lot of people talk about how different, the first handful, the first kind of like overall founding team, the first engineers, product designers, marketing, sales, et cetera. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone says the first 10 hires will really set up your culture and what your business is going forward. So I can think about this in both operationally, how I think about hiring, and then both how I thought about actually who to hire. So operationally, early days for me was 100%, not 100, but maybe 80% of my time was spent on hiring. Like I think some founders, they think it just happens magically. And I thought that originally. I was like, okay, I'm going to get this seed fundraising and then boom, everything's going to be fine. But no, you have to be sourcing individually and you have to be really going deep, doing, all the diligence you can on all these folks. And it's really time consuming. And my philosophy towards this early hiring, I was going to make this close to a full-time job. Like I knew this was the most important thing in the early days. And so obviously I was looking for skill set. Like the people I hired had to be what you call 10x engineers, 10x marketers, whatever, great in that aspect. But I think a personality fit also. So really looking for no ego, super humble, doesn't take themselves too seriously, and fit with the culture that we're trying to set. So there were many of folks that we interviewed that were stellar engineers, but they didn't fit into the values that we were setting as a company, and we passed on them because we knew that that would have such high impact in the early days. And one other thing I'd say for early hiring, I really wanted to focus on people who can move quickly, figure things out, get things done, were experimental, autonomous, rather than maybe a 20-year expertise in their field. I cared more about they're ready to hustle and get stuff done and learn and go than getting it exactly perfectly right.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, every week, every month, every quarter, things change so quickly at startups in terms of priorities and what the most important thing to do is. And you need people that have that flexible mindset. And it's not, that they just can do it, but that they want to, right? Everyone wants to grow in the same direction and everything. So totally hear you. Well, last question, and my personal favorite. If you could go back to day one, starting to work on Pocus, what single piece of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. Not take everything so seriously. So when
Good luck. You're a founder.
Yeah. No, but I'm seriously working on that. And I talk to a lot of founders about this. It's obviously my baby, and every founder feels like their company is their baby. But at the same time, I want to be enjoying the journey, not just the milestones. So I'm trying to transform my mindset from going to, this thing didn't go as well as I wish it could, I'm such a failure, to, wow, I learned a lot from this. This is incredible that I got this lesson. Now let's go implement it. And so I wish I learned that, very, very early on, because when you look back, you're like, okay, this wasn't that big of a deal. Like, if anything, I learned and I'll improve. And I want to keep that going forward.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like already from this conversation, you look at things a lot like that. I think that's a lifelong practice, though, in terms of just, appreciation and gratitude is a thing. Hopefully, everyone's improving on day to day. But that's a great company as well as life advice to end on. So if people want to learn more about Pocus, get in touch, chat about product-led sales, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, Pocus.com is our website. You can sign up for our newsletter, our community. You can request an invite. And I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter at Alexa Grabell. Awesome.
Well, thanks for joining, sharing with the startup community what you've learned so far, and excited to follow the future of Pocus.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right.
You're listening to Accords from Vendorship to Partnership, where we dive into building startups, signing customers, and scaling collaborative, repeatable sales processes. For more episodes like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening.